If you're over 60 and you've been snacking on nuts because you think they're good for you, I understand completely. For decades, the medical community, nutritionists, fitness experts, everyone has told you the same thing. Eat nuts, they're healthy. And honestly, for much of your life, they were right. But here's what nobody is telling you, and this is the part that concerns me as a physician. After the age of 60, your body is fundamentally different. The way you process fats, the way you respond to certain proteins, the way your hormones regulate hunger and fat storage, it all shifts. And several of the most popular nuts on the market today are exploiting those changes in ways that quietly destroy your metabolism. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to give you the science. Because when my patients start doing everything right, eating healthy snacks, cutting sugar, watching their portions, and they're still gaining weight, still feeling sluggish, still seeing their numbers go in the wrong direction, often the culprit is sitting right there in their kitchen cabinet, in a bag labeled heart healthy. So today, I'm going to name all 4 of them. I'm going to tell you exactly why each one is a problem after 60, show you the research behind it, and give you better alternatives that actually work with your metabolism instead of against it. Stay with me until the end, because the replacement list I share might surprise you just as much as the ones I'm warning you about. Before we get to the specific nuts, I want to take 2 minutes to explain what's actually happening inside your body after 60. Because once you understand this, everything else I say will make complete sense. First, insulin sensitivity. When you're younger, your cells respond quickly and efficiently to insulin. Insulin is the hormone that tells your cells to absorb glucose from your bloodstream. But as we age, especially after 60, many people develop what's called insulin resistance. Your cells don't respond as well as they used to. That means blood sugar stays elevated longer after eating, and your body is more likely to store those extra calories as fat rather than burn them. Second, your basal metabolic rate slows down. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism confirms that metabolic rate declines significantly with age, roughly 1 to 2% per decade after 30, and it accelerates further after 60. This means that the same portion of food that was perfectly fine at 45 can contribute to weight gain at 65. Third, chronic low-grade inflammation. As we age, the body's immune response becomes chronically activated, a process scientists sometimes call inflammaging. This inflammation is linked to metabolic dysfunction, weight gain, fatigue, and increased risk of diabetes and heart disease. And here's the critical point. Certain foods, including certain nuts, dramatically amplify this inflammatory state. Fourth, your gut microbiome changes. The diversity and composition of your gut bacteria shifts significantly after 60. Certain foods that were well tolerated before can now cause bloating, poor nutrient absorption, and metabolic disruption. Now, with all of that as your foundation, let's talk about the 4 nuts that are working against every single one of these systems. The first one is cashews, and I know this one might hurt to hear, because cashews are delicious. They're creamy, mildly sweet, and they're everywhere. Grocery stores, airlines, office snack bowls, and the packaging almost always says something like good source of protein or heart healthy. But let me give you the real numbers. Among all tree nuts, cashews have one of the highest carbohydrate contents. A single 1-ounce serving, that's roughly 18 cashews, about a small handful, contains approximately 9 grams of carbohydrates and only about 1 gram of fiber. Compare that to almonds, which have 6 grams of carbs and 3.5 grams of fiber in the same serving size. Why does that matter after 60? Because fiber slows the absorption of carbohydrates into your bloodstream, less fiber means faster absorption. Faster absorption means a sharper spike in blood sugar. And for someone over 60 who already has reduced insulin sensitivity, that spike is harder to manage. stays elevated longer, and triggers a larger insulin response. A 2019 study published in Nutrients that specifically tracked postprandial, meaning after meal, glucose responses in adults over 60 found that low-fiber, moderate-carb snacks produce significantly greater blood sugar variability compared to high-fiber alternatives. And blood sugar variability, not just overall levels, is now understood to be one of the strongest drivers of metabolic dysfunction in older adults. There's also the caloric density problem. Cashews are extremely easy to overeat. Because of their smooth texture and mild sweetness, there's very little natural stopping signal. Most people who sit down with a bag of cashews don't stop at 18. They stop when the bag is gone. And at 160 calories per ounce, that adds up quickly when your metabolic rate has slowed down. My recommendation? If you love cashews, don't eliminate them entirely, but treat them as an occasional food. Keep your portion to no more than 10 to 12 pieces, and never eat them alone as a snack. Pair them with a high-protein food to slow glucose absorption. The second one is going to surprise a lot of you. Peanuts. Peanuts are probably the most consumed nut in America. Peanut butter is practically a cultural institution. And yes, peanuts do contain protein. But there's a lot your peanut butter label isn't telling you. First, and this surprises many people, peanuts are not actually nuts. Botanically, they are legumes in the same family as lentils and soybeans. This matters because legumes contain significantly higher concentrations of certain compounds that tree nuts do not, specifically lectins and phytates. Lectins are proteins that can bind to the lining of your intestines. In large amounts, they can increase intestinal permeability, what some researchers call leaky gut, and contribute to systemic inflammation. For a 60-year-old whose gut lining is already thinner and more sensitive than it was at 40, this is a meaningful concern. Phytates, also called phytic acid, bind to minerals like zinc, magnesium, and iron in your digestive tract and prevent your body from absorbing them. Magnesium in particular plays a critical role in insulin signaling. Lower magnesium absorption means poorer blood sugar control. In older adults who are already at higher risk for magnesium deficiency, regular peanut consumption can quietly make this worse. But here's the thing that concerns me most about peanuts specifically: the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Peanuts contain very high levels of omega-6 fatty acids and virtually no omega-3 fatty acids. The ideal dietary ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is somewhere between 2 to 1 and 4 to 1. Peanuts deliver a ratio closer to 5,000 to 1. That extreme imbalance is a known driver of inflammatory pathways in the body, pathways that directly impair insulin sensitivity and metabolic function. And then there's commercial peanut butter. Most major brands add hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils to improve texture and shelf life. Even in small amounts, these trans fats have been linked to increased LDL cholesterol, decreased HDL cholesterol, and systemic inflammation. The American Heart Association recommends avoiding them entirely, and yet they're sitting in millions of American pantries under the label healthy protein snack. My recommendation? If you enjoy peanut butter, switch to a brand that lists only 2 ingredients, peanuts and salt, and limit your intake to no more than 1 tablespoon per day. The third category isn't one specific nut, it's a preparation method that turns otherwise acceptable nuts into something your metabolism is not designed to handle. I'm talking about flavored, heavily roasted, and salted mixed nuts. Walk down any snack aisle in America and you'll see them everywhere. honey-roasted cashews, sriracha almonds, sea salt and cracked pepper macadamias, ranch-flavored mixed nuts. They're marketed as better for you than chips, and technically that might be true, but compared to raw, unprocessed nuts, they're a completely different food. Here's why this matters. When nuts are roasted at high temperatures, typically above 300 degrees Fahrenheit, the polyunsaturated fats they contain begin to oxidize. Oxidized lipids are fats that have chemically degraded and become unstable. When you consume oxidized fats, they contribute to oxidative stress in your body, a process that damages cells, promotes inflammation, and is directly linked to metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease, and accelerated aging. A 2020 study in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry found measurable levels of lipid oxidation products in commercially dry roasted nuts, with oxidation levels increasing significantly at higher roasting temperatures and longer roasting times. Then there's the added sodium. A typical serving of salted mixed nuts contains between 100 and 200 milligrams of sodium. That may not sound like much, but older adults are far more sensitive to sodium's effects on blood pressure and fluid retention. Excess sodium causes your body to retain water, which raises blood pressure. And for people over 60 who are already managing hypertension, this can undo weeks of careful dietary discipline. And then the flavoring itself. Honey-roasted nuts contain added sugar. Even light honey glazes can add 3 to 5 grams of sugar per serving. Ranch or seasoning blends often contain maltodextrin, a highly processed starch with a glycemic index higher than table sugar, mixed with artificial flavors and preservatives. You're not eating a nut anymore. You're eating a candy-coated, chemically flavored product that happens to have a nut at its center. My recommendation? Always choose raw or lightly dry roasted with no added oil, no added sugar, no added flavoring. If you want flavor, add your own. A pinch of sea salt, a sprinkle of cinnamon, a little paprika at home where you control the ingredients. Now this fourth one has a twist, because Brazil nuts themselves are not inherently bad. In fact, they contain one of the highest concentrations of a critical antioxidant mineral of any food on Earth. The problem is that after 60, the line between beneficial and harmful with Brazil nuts is razor thin, and almost nobody talks about it. I'm talking about selenium toxicity. Brazil nuts are extraordinarily rich in selenium. A single Brazil nut contains approximately 68 to 91 micrograms of selenium. The recommended daily intake for adults is 55 micrograms. The tolerable upper limit, the maximum amount considered safe to consume daily without risk of adverse effects, is 400 micrograms, according to the National Institutes of Health. That means eating just 5 Brazil nuts puts you at or above your daily upper limit. Now, most health articles will tell you just eat 1 or 2 Brazil nuts a day for your selenium. And if people actually did that, there would be no problem. But in my clinical experience, people do not eat 1 or 2 Brazil nuts. They grab a handful, they add them to trail mix, they keep eating from the container while watching television. And before they know it, they've consumed 500, 700, even 1,000 micrograms of selenium in a single sitting. Chronic selenium overconsumption, a condition called selenosis, causes symptoms that are frequently misattributed to normal aging in people over 60. These include persistent fatigue, hair thinning or hair loss, brittle nails, gastrointestinal distress, brain fog, and, most critically, thyroid disruption. Your thyroid is the master regulator of your metabolism. It controls how fast or slow your body burns calories, how your cells use energy, and how efficiently your hormones communicate. Even subclinical thyroid disruption, changes too small to show up dramatically on a standard thyroid panel, can produce noticeable metabolic slowing, weight gain, and fatigue. A case series published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition documented multiple patients who developed clear symptoms of selenosis from regular consumption of Brazil nuts without ever realizing it, because each individual nut seemed harmless. My recommendation? Brazil nuts are fine, but limit yourself strictly to 1, maximum 2 per day on most days of the week. Do not add them to trail mix. Do not eat them while distracted. Treat each one as a supplement, not a snack. Now I want to pause and talk directly to those of you who might be watching this and thinking, this is me. I've been eating these nuts for years. If any of the following 5 things sound familiar, your metabolism may already be paying a price, and it's important that you know this is not your fault. You were given incomplete information. You were following advice that didn't account for how your body works after 60. Sign number 1. You're gaining weight even though you haven't significantly changed your eating habits. If your diet hasn't changed much but the scale keeps creeping up, especially around the abdomen, that's a classic sign of metabolic disruption. It's not a willpower issue, it's a biochemistry issue. Sign number 2. You experience bloating, gas, or digestive discomfort after snacking. Particularly if this happens after eating peanuts or cashews, your gut may be reacting to the lectins, phytates, or carbohydrate load. Many of my patients describe this as feeling heavy or uncomfortable for an hour or two after what seemed like a light snack. Sign number 3. You feel an energy crash in the afternoon, especially after a mid-morning or mid-afternoon nut snack. That crash is your blood sugar spiking and then dropping. It's your body telling you the snack triggered a glucose response it couldn't manage efficiently. Sign number 4. Your blood sugar numbers, fasting glucose or A1C, aren't improving even though you've cleaned up your diet in other ways. If you've cut out obvious sugars and processed foods, but you're still seeing numbers that concern your doctor, a hidden glycemic load from high-carb nuts like cashews could be a contributing factor. Sign number 5. Fatigue, brain fog, or hair thinning that you've written off as just getting older. Especially if you've been eating Brazil nuts regularly. These are textbook symptoms of low-grade selenium overload that disrupts thyroid function. If you recognize yourself in 2 or more of these signs, I'd encourage you to speak with your physician. And in the meantime, let's talk about what you should be eating. Here's what I tell my own patients when we have this conversation in my office. It's not about eliminating nuts from your life. It's about choosing the ones whose nutritional profile actually aligns with what your body needs after 60. Number 1. Macadamia nuts. If I could only recommend one nut for adults over 60, it would be macadamia. Here's why. Macadamia nuts have the lowest omega-6 content of any nut, which means they're the least inflammatory. They're rich in monounsaturated fats, the same healthy fats found in olive oil, which support cardiovascular health and insulin sensitivity. And they're very low in carbohydrates, about 4 grams per ounce, with 2.5 grams of fiber. That gives them one of the best glycemic profiles of any nut on the market. They're also surprisingly filling, which helps with portion control. Number 2. Walnuts. Raw, unsalted. Walnuts are the only nut that contains a meaningful amount of ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid. For an older adult trying to reduce systemic inflammation, that omega-3 content is significant. Research from UCLA found that regular walnut consumption was associated with better cognitive function in older adults, likely because omega-3 fatty acids support brain cell membrane health. 1 ounce, about 14 walnut halves, is the ideal daily portion. Number 3. Almonds, with the skin on. The skin of the almond is where much of its prebiotic fiber lives. fiber that feeds beneficial bacteria in your gut and supports microbiome diversity. Almonds are also rich in vitamin E, a fat-soluble antioxidant that protects cells against oxidative damage. And multiple studies have shown that a daily serving of almonds is associated with better blood sugar control and improved insulin sensitivity in middle-aged and older adults. Again, raw or lightly dry roasted, no flavoring, no added oil. Number 4. Pecans. Pecans are consistently ranked among the highest of all nuts in antioxidant capacity. They contain high levels of gamma-tocopherol, a form of vitamin E, as well as various polyphenols that reduce oxidative stress. They're low in carbohydrates, high in monounsaturated fat, and have a low glycemic index. And importantly, they have one of the most satisfying, rich flavor profiles of any nut, meaning you're less likely to feel deprived when you swap them in. The golden rules for all of them. Raw is always better than roasted. Whole is always better than processed. And portion matters. Even the healthiest nuts will work against you if you're eating 3 or 4 ounces at a time. A single ounce, a small handful, is the right daily portion for most adults over 60. And timing matters too. Have your nuts in the morning or early afternoon, not late at night when your metabolic rate is at its lowest. Let me bring this all together for you. After 60, your metabolism is not broken, but it is different. It's more sensitive to blood sugar spikes. It's more vulnerable to inflammation. It's more affected by certain proteins and compounds that your younger body handled without issue. And several of the nuts you've been reaching for as a healthy snack have been quietly working against those very systems. Cashews. Too many carbohydrates, too little fiber, too easy to overeat. Peanuts. Pro-inflammatory omega-6 imbalance, lectins, phytates, and the hidden dangers of commercial processing. Flavored and roasted mixed nuts. Oxidized fats, hidden sugars, excess sodium, and ingredients you can't control. Brazil nuts in excess, a selenium overload risk that can disrupt your thyroid and mimic the symptoms of normal aging. None of this means you have to give up nuts forever. It means you have to be smarter about which ones you choose, how they're prepared, and how much you eat. The 4 alternatives I've given you today, macadamia, walnuts, almonds, and pecans, are all foods that, in appropriate portions, work with your biology after 60, not against it. Small changes make a real difference. I've seen it in my patients repeatedly. You don't need a dramatic overhaul. You need the right information. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Which of these 4 nuts surprised you the most? And be honest. How many of you are quietly going to go check your pantry right now? If this video helped you, please give it a thumbs up. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need this information. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss next week's video, where I'll be covering the #1 breakfast food that doctors are now saying may be aging your heart faster after 60. You'll want to see that one. I'm Dr. Leonid Kim. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of your health, because you've worked hard enough in this life to enjoy it.